Welcome, everyone. I wanted to get started because we have a bit of a packed schedule for the next next 2 hours. There's one presenter who's still not here, but who's on the second panel, so I'll expect Professor Greg Carr to join us probably in a few minutes. So welcome. This is the panel Recovering the Howard School of International Affairs, and we've organized this panel in conjunction with the American Political Science Association meeting, which is taking place in Washington, D.C. this weekend, this long weekend. And this panel is an attempt to really spark and to initiate a dialogue on the internationalist tradition among African American and Afro-Caribbean scholars here at Howard and in the Historically Black Academy. There's some exciting and interesting new scholarship taking place outside of Howard and off campus that I thought the Howard community would be interested to learn about and to know about. So we have some outside scholars coming to make paper presentations, and then I wanted to certainly, because we're having it as an off-site panel, the idea was to include Howard scholars and allow them to join in the conversation and talk more broadly about the significance of the scholarship that has been done right here at Howard, especially in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and how we might reclaim and reposition that body of scholarship as we move forward in the contemporary era. So without further ado, I just want to make a few thank yous because, of course, things like this don't go off without many people's support and assistance. My name is Krista Johnson, and I'm chair of the panel, and I'm also a professor here in the Department of African Studies. And so I want to thank my home institution, of course, my home department, and my chair, Professor Mbai Chan, for his support, financial and otherwise, for allowing me to organize this panel, as well as Ms. Oni Spratt, who's our administrative assistant, who has done all the advertising and everything else for us, as well as our graduate students, Piwo Nyandu, Amira Cheney, who's no longer a graduate student, and others who really helped out in terms of advertising this. Dr. Dodson, Howard Dodson, from the Director of Libraries and from the Moreland Swingarn Research Center, his staff in the center have been fantastic in providing some photos and other materials and just being supportive in terms of us getting this panel together. The Office of the Provost, and especially Dr. Joseph Reedy, has been very supportive both financially and intellectually for this project, and we really appreciate that support. The Office of the Dean, Dean Budagation in the College of Arts and Sciences, has been lending his support. And the list probably goes on, but those are some of the main characters that I wanted to make sure not to forget to acknowledge. So we have invited Professor Dianne Pinderhughes to give some opening remarks for the panel, and I will ask for Professor Pinderhughes to come forward now. Professor Pinderhughes is the Presidential Faculty Fellow in the Departments of Political Science and Africana Studies at the University of Notre Dame, and is also the former APSA President for the years 2007 and 2008. So we're very honored to have her come to our panel and to give opening remarks to us today. Thank you, Professor Pinderhughes.
Thank you very much, Professor Johnson. It's always good to be able to come home. I'm actually a native of Washington and spent 1 year here on the faculty in political science, and also rejoined scholars I've known for years, learning to meet new scholars, and my graduate school colleagues, Lorenzo Morris, Charles Henry, Tony Michelle Travis, who we went to Chicago together, University of Chicago, but we didn't meet until we went to grad school, even though our mothers went to the same high school and we grew up in the city. So, interesting times. So I'm very honored to have been asked by Krista Johnson to offer a few opening remarks for this panel on Recovering the Howard School of International Affairs. You're in for a very rich discussion on this topic, in which political scientists such as Ralph Bunche and Merz Tate have played, as well as Howard University itself has served as the foundation on which these and other scholars played such a vital role. The intellectual and institutional histories provide insight into the complicated lives that have been lived here on this ground. My introduction to some aspects of this began many years ago as my grad school colleague Charles Henry who taught him in the 1970s, eventually came to study the work of Ralph Bunche in creating his 2005 biography Ralph Bunche, Model Negro or American Other, ? Over the years that Charles worked on the biography, he was, for example, visiting UCLA's archives in 1984 when I held a postdoc there. Notice the time I mentioned. The book was published in 2005. He was visiting the Howard UCLA archives in 1984. It took a while to get the book out, but I'm very familiar with it. It taking a long time. It's not a criticism. It's like, I thought, oh, that's good. See, I'm not the slowest. Or I'm not the only one who's very slow. I'm much slower than him. He also came to know the filmmaker William Greaves, and he watched Greaves' award-winning development of his award-winning documentary of Bunche, which appeared on PBS. I invited Charles, and I invited Greaves to participate and present on their work at the University of Illinois Urbana when I was there. I very much look forward to Professor Henry's comments and observations on the papers that will be presented today. In another role in preparation for an APSA Women's Caucus celebration, it was the 25th anniversary of the Women's Caucus, my grad student Rosalind Fielder unearthed for me the information that Howard University faculty member Maurice Tate, like Bunche, had earned her PhD at Howard and taught at Harvard. She earned her PhD and taught at Howard. I think because she taught in the Department of History, despite having earned her PhD in government about 1943 at Harvard, she functioned here departmentally and in the minds of other colleagues, even those in political science who knew her, such as the chair Vincent Brown, who was another Harvard government PhD. She functioned here as an historian. When Fielder shared this information with me, I consulted with Southern University and later Prairie View A&M University faculty member Jewel Krista, who just recently passed away. Yes, she did, just about 3 weeks ago now. Who earned her PhD at the University of Iowa in the early 1950s. And I asked her about her knowledge of Tate. Jewel was surprised, but was also taken aback because she'd spent some time doing research, years, doing research on Black women political scientists. In fact, I remember Professor Pearl Robinson talking about her riding the bus, filling out the questionnaire, and filling out the questionnaire for weeks because it took so detailed. So she's here to testify about that questionnaire. So Professor Krista had spent some years doing research on Black women political scientists, had consulted with the Howard Department's faculty members about those who had completed, those Black women who had completed Howard and or had taught there and who would have had degrees in political science and their knowledge of others. They failed to report to Tate, to the president, that Tate had earned a degree in political science. So in effect, Professor Tate, although having earned a degree in government, it was called government, still is called government, functioned as an historian. Toni Michelle Travis, for example, reported that both of her parents were taught by Tate. Charles Henry reported that he overlapped with her here at Howard, but because of the history department affiliation, he had contact with her. I very much look forward to Professor Barbara Savage's paper on Maurice Tate, diplomatic historian, cosmopolitan woman. Pearl Robinson has also worked in various aspects of Bunche's career. As president of the African Studies Association, for example, her 2007 African Studies Association presidential address was entitled Ralph Bunche and African Studies, Reflections on the Politics of Knowledge. That was published in the African Studies Review in 2008. Professor Robinson presented some of this work at an IPSA World Congress in Durban, South Africa in 2003, where we shared a room. Today, she discusses UN trusteeship in Howard University, the Howard University Conference on Trust and Non-Self-Governing Territories. I'm less familiar with the work of Professor Robert Vitalis or Robert Edgar, but their work will also be exciting. Vitalis is working on a project, The End of Empire in American Political Science, and this is taken from his website, which moves away from the Middle East to explore the unwritten history of international relations, development and narrative studies, and to recover the African-American internationalist traditions. His paper today is The Fate of the Howard School. Robert Edgar's paper today is Howard University in South Africa, Jan Smuts and African-American Leadership in 1930. Edgar published in 1992 the book An African-American in South Africa, the research diary of Ralph Bunche. And I believe that Professor Robinson talked about having used that diary for her work on lunch. I have to say this. I look forward to remarking Professor Lorenzo Morris. I have to say this, or I'll be in trouble. An old friend. Longtime member of the Howard Political Science faculty member, and also, I believe, Professor Greg Carr of the African American Studies Department. So, that's my introduction. I have no doubt that we are all in for a very rich and stimulating exploration of the work of Howard University faculty members and scholars. And thank you, Professor Johnson, for the opportunity to participate in this wonderful panel covering the Howard School of International Affairs.
I think we'll just go in order of the flyer that's in the panel as it was listed in the APSA outline. And I'll introduce, I think, each presenter as they come up. So our first paper presenter will be Professor Robert Vitalis from the University of Pennsylvania. And the title of his paper is The Fates of the Howard School.